This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so perfect timing. We're just about to start going back through the workflow. So you can see now Carly's case file sitting here too, right? We can see that she's in public. And so when you want to, let's go back to the homepage. So when a request comes in and you want to review it, I recommend that you come over here to where it says public and go to view all. It's going to bring you into this view we were just looking at. So now we're here under accessibility and accommodations. And now I can open up her case file using this little magnifying glass. This is sort of like your view everything button, right? So if you see a magnifying glass, it will let you open something up. So I'm going to open up her case file. I can see a couple of things right off the bat. So up on the top here, you can see if the student submitted documentation with their request. You could add a case note. So, maybe Carly called you earlier. You could, and you see her request come in, and you might open up and put a note in here to say, hey, I spoke with a student on the phone earlier, something like that. I can see over here her course schedule, and I can also see the document she submitted down here as well. And then if I scroll down, I can see all of the answers to the questions in the accessibility request. So I can see, everything she filled out. The last thing that I can see is that there's a gray box around her name. This is a good thing. This tells me that Carly is in your student import. So we kind of want to see this. So that's a good thing. And so at this point, you have two options. So you can archive this request, which would, it doesn't delete it, but it does take it out of your regular pool of requests, right? So like if Carly filled this out for the wrong reason or something, you could archive it. I think really for the most part, you're just going to want to accept and review so that you can work on this case file. So I would hit accept and review. It's going to tell you, hey, you're approving, you're bringing a public request into the system. So you're not like approving accommodations. The student doesn't get notified. This is just you bringing her out of public. I would just go ahead and hit save. Okay, you won't have to do this. Don't worry about that. You'll hit accept and review, and then you'll be able to hit save. And then you can see she's just sitting here in pending approval. So that's what we want. Accommodation type. Okay, that's a note for myself. So now that I have brought her into pending approval, I can see that I have a lot more options. Like now I can really do a lot more with her case file. Any questions before I keep moving?
No, as of right now, no questions.
Okay.
Everything looks great. Everything is organized. I really like the way this platform is.
Oh, good. Awesome. Okay, great. So yeah, so again, once you bring her into pending approval, you'll notice that her case file or her accommodation request is just made up of all those questions, right? The public form like builds her request. Probably similar to the other way you were doing it, but and so at this point, I would say, so in your process, after a student submits their request, it sounds like they must also provide some documentation, right, to you? Okay. So if a student has not given you documentation with their request, do you have an email that you typically send out to request that information?
Yes, yes, we usually try to keep up with the student because we want to make sure they bring us the documentation. So yes.
Okay. So I'm making a list right now of all the things I'm going to ask you for, and that's one of
Okay.
them. So if you can send me that email template, perfect. Because then what you
Okay.
can do is, so like if if Carly submits this request and maybe she didn't submit documentation, you need to send her a letter to say, hey, please submit documentation. So what you can do is go right to the letters tab. You would click send new accommodation letter, and then you would have a bunch of templates to choose from. One of them would be like, we need documentation. And then what would happen is that template will just automatically populate. And so you can, everything would be filled out for you, and you could just go ahead and email it directly to the student. It will pull in
Okay.
their name, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
As of right now, we don't have a specific template about this kind of follow-ups.
okay.
We just start a new email and just email the student and tell them to remind them that they need to submit or that they need to send us some documents, etc.
Mhm. Okay. I can send you a template if you want to look at one, and then maybe you could update it
Okay.
with like your own document requirements or something. That's what a lot of schools will do.
Okay, that sounds perfect.
Okay, great. Um, okay, so that would be one option. And again, it's an open workflow, so you can kind of do whatever you need to do, right? So a student hasn't gotten you documentation, you could send them an email. And then if you walk away, her case file is just going to stay here in pending approval until you're ready to move on. So that's the nice thing. It will always stay right here until you need to do something else with it. Um, for my example, let's pretend that Carly did submit documentation and you're ready to move on. Do you meet with the student? Do you meet with every student who requests accommodations?
Yes.
Okay, so I would maybe recommend that then you use this request meeting button. So the blue box in the middle is always going to have like suggested what it thinks you should do next. And so if you use this request meeting button, you'll see a couple of options. The top button would allow you to send an email to the student requesting that they meet with you. This create appointment and find availability option would take you into the appointments module, and you could schedule an appointment with the student. Um, and so if you don't know their availability, you could just go in here to request meeting. Um, you can indicate the type of meeting. So like this would be, an initial accommodation meeting or something. I would hit save and create letter, and then it's going to pull you into a letter template. That again, I would ask you to send me if you have one. If not, I could, send you the template and you can add to it. But that way, an email can go right out to the student that says, thanks for submitting your request. Please log in. If you're going to use Accommodate for appointments, you could say, please log in, use the appointments module, schedule your appointment. And then any other information like that you want them to know, you could put in there. And so when you're ready, you would just come down here and you'll have these buttons on the bottom. Email letter now will send the letter directly to the student. You can always online preview and make sure that like the merge codes are pulling in the student's name, make sure that it's pulling in your login URL, stuff like that. And then when you're ready, you would just go ahead and email the letter now. And so in our fake process, we have reviewed Carly's request and asked her to meet with us. And so you can always come back into her letters tab to see anything you've sent. So any questions before I move on?
No, as of right now, everything's perfect.
Okay. Okay, so after the student has given you documentation and you've met with them, are you ready to approve accommodations, or are there any other steps in here?
Yes, after the initial meeting, initial interview, we talk with the student about their needs. We tell them about the accommodations that we can give them, and after that, we just um, submit in the system everything that they need, and that's it.
Okay. Okay, so this button in the middle, after you have met with the student, if you've used that request meeting button, this button will pop up that says approve reject. And so that's how you can go in now and actually add the accommodations. So I'm going to use that button. I'm going to scroll down um, all the way down here to this internal. Okay, here's another question I have. I didn't know if I should use like the masculine or the feminine version of the word on its own. So this might be totally wrong, but is that for internal?
That's
Like
the
if I just want to,
internal. It's okay. That's great.
okay. But basically, this is, I just put internal so that you know that only you see this, right? This is what you fill
Yes.
out. Okay, and so you would put in, you know, the accommodation that you're going to approve. And then if you want, so something you can think about is if you want descriptions for some of these to just populate automatically, like in the accommodation letter for faculty, you could send me those descriptions and I can add them to the pick list, and then they just pop up when you pick that accommodation. You can also add your own. So if you have something specific for this student, you can put that in here. You want to make sure you note whether or not the accommodation is approved. This box will open up called decision details. This is internal. So if you wanted to make a note about why it was approved, only you would see that. The student wouldn't see that, the faculty won't see it. And then you want to come in here and attach that to a semester. You can also connect that to their courses, right? To say, okay, this student is going to be approved for this accommodation for both courses, or not. And then these last two items down here, so non-academic would be, and I'm just looking back at your answers. Do you approve any accommodations that are not academic? So like housing or
Yes.
parking?
Parking, housing, and note-taking assistant.
Okay. Okay. So if it was something like a parking accommodation that you did not need faculty to know about, you could mark it as non-academic yes.
Okay.
The courses go away, and that way it doesn't go on any faculty letters. If you have already checked the courses though, and then you click non-academic, it's still going to be connected to those classes. So just make sure that they're not checked, and then you would mark it as non-academic. And then non-renewable is like temporary. So if a student breaks their arm and you give them a scribe for 2 months, and then you don't want them to request that again because they only needed it for their broken arm, you could say, yeah, this is not renewable. Yes, it expires, and then you put in the date that it expires.
That's perfect.
Yeah. And then they will be able to use, like, it'll show up on their accommodation letter as good until, you know, October 31st. And then if they come back in the spring and they want to request that again, they won't be able to just add it to their letter. They'll have to request it through you. And then you just request additional accommodation for every single accommodation you want to, you know, give to the student. So, I think if I know, is that tutoring maybe? Approved, tie it to summer, go to the courses, and we'll just leave this one as renewable. And so once you're finished with all of that, you would go ahead and save. And then if you scroll down, you can see those accommodations in here. So you can see the accommodation you approved, what courses it applies to, etc. And then up here in the blue box, it's going to recommend that you send an official letter, like an accommodation letter. So you'll click on send official letter. I would ask you for your official accommodation letter template that you have, because I can put that in here, and then it will automatically add the accommodations. If you need to add, you know, anyone else to this email, like, or to this letter, like if, you know, they've requested that you send a copy to their mom, or you need to copy Marielle for some reason, like you can always CC those email addresses in here. And then if we online preview, you can see
Would that
that.
be the same? Excuse me. Would that be the same letter that you asked me on the last email? The
Yeah.
accommodation letter? Yes. All right. I have that with me. If you want, I'll send
Oh,
you after the meeting is over.
perfect. Okay, yeah, that would be great. That would be perfect. Okay. And so now we can online preview just to make sure everything came in. So dear Carly, this is just the template letter, but thanks for submitting. And then you can see it pulls in all the information from the accommodation. And if you had a description, that would show up in here too. So the faculty or students can see all of this information. And then down at the bottom, you have two other options. So requesting student signature and faculty signature. And so I think in your answers, you had said that you are interested in both of those options.
Yes,
And
both
so,
of them.
okay, so let me just tell you a little bit about how these buttons, how the signatures work. So if you request student signature, so Carly is our fake student, you request student signature, Carly will get an email, an automatic email that says, "Dear Carly, an accommodation letter has been created for you. Please log in to Accommodate to view and sign it." And then if you request faculty signature, any faculty who has a course that's associated with one of these accommodations would also get an automatic email that says, "Dear professor, an accommodation letter has been created for one of your students. Please log in to view and sign it." What's really nice about doing it this way is that each of these faculty will get sort of like their own custom letter. So they will get a letter that only has accommodations for their class. And then Carly, the student, would get a letter with everything. And so, if you request signatures, nobody gets this in the body of the email. They log into Accommodate, and then they can look at the letter, they can sign it, and they can like download it as a PDF or do whatever they need to do with it.
Perfect.
So, and just also so you know, so if you don't request faculty signature, the system does not send anything to the faculty at all, just so you're aware, right? Then it would be totally up to the student to give them their letter, which many schools prefer, but if you want the faculty to get a copy of the letter in their interface, you would request faculty signature, which I think is pretty nice. And then same thing for student, if you don't request student signature, they will actually just get this in the body of the email. So nothing goes to their faculty, but they get, a copy of their accommodation letter in the email. Okay. Any questions about that?
No questions.
Okay, perfect. So once you have requested any signatures, if you're going to request them, you would go ahead and email the letter now. And then what you can see is what's gone out. So it's going to pull us into the letters tab in Carly's file and show us, Carly received her official accommodation letter. We can see when it was sent, like a date and timestamp set. And then down here, we can see the two letters that went out to her faculty. So one letter went out to Professor Haberman. If we open it up, we can see only his course in here, which is nice. So he's getting just his own course accommodations. And then same thing for Brewbreaker. And then once they're signed, if they do sign them, you can see the signatures in here. And those are also date and timestamp. So you can see when they signed. Stuff like that. So once you have sent your accommodation letters, come back in here to the core tab. And again, it's an open workflow. So if at any point you need to upload a document or add a case note, you can do that at any point, obviously. But when you're finished with all those things, you would want to come to accommodation delivered, mark as delivered, and then that is going to move her case file into completed. So like, okay, I've already taken care of her letters and everything.
Okay.
So briefly, just to show you, I'll show you notes and documents, and then I was going to log in as the student so you can see what they would see and what the faculty sees. So you come in here to the notes tab, and you click add new case note. You can pick a category. This list is editable. So if you want to put in a whole different list of types of notes, that's fine. You can put in a subject, phone call with student, and then you put in your notes. So Carly called the office and we discussed how to register. And then you can add an attachment. You can make it viewable, but most folks, I think, leave notes as private, and then you go ahead and submit. So now you can see.
Yes, we keep them private.
Okay, perfect. I don't actually even think that the notes section is turned on in the student interface, so I'll make sure that that's off. And then.
All right.
And then for documents, you would come in here to the Documents tab. Again, you can review what she has submitted. If you use the little magnifying glass, it will pull you in here. You can click on it and it will download the document. You can add a document too by clicking Add New Document, and then you fill out the information, you know, drag and drop or upload it and stuff. So yeah. And so that's briefly, but that's really the workflow. You can kind of take that and do whatever you like with it, right? So there's great functionality, but ultimately you can determine sort of what your own process looks like. And so let me log in as Carly. So when I want to log in as a student, I go into the Students tab and find their student profile. So like for Carly, we were just in her Accessibility Accommodations case file over here. And now under Students, if I go and I find Carly, it takes me into her student profile, which is really where all of the data we're going to bring in will live. So if we bring in her address, her phone number, you know, all that stuff from your student information system, maybe we'll bring in the student's major and, you know, what year they are in school or things like that. That will all live in here. The other great thing you can do from their student profile is log in as them. So if I log in as Carly, pop this out, it will show me what the student interface. So now I can see what students see when they log into Accommodate. And so if you if you request Carly's signature and you want her to get her accommodation letters, she would log into Accommodate. She'd come over here to Accommodation and click on Accommodation Letters, and then she can see the letters you've sent. So one of them is just that meeting request that you sent her. And then this one is her actual accommodation letter, and you can see that we requested her signature. It says requested right here. She'll click on it. She can review the letter, and then she can sign right here. This we can all change. So like we can, change it to Spanish. And then if you want to update the language here to let them know what they're signing, things like that, you can do that. They'll go ahead and save. And then now it says signed. So that's how students log in. And then she can open this up again and she can generate a PDF. She can print it. She can do whatever she needs to do with it. Any questions?
No, as of right now, everything's great.
Okay.
Is that the screen that the students are going to see?
Yes. So this is
All right.
This is their interface. Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. And then let's log in as one of those faculty members. So I'm going to go into the faculty tab. And then same thing, faculty will have some information, but usually you don't bring in a lot of info on faculty. So from here, you can log in as a faculty member. And so this is what the faculty will see when they log in. It's pretty similar, only they just have fewer options.
Right, perfect.
Yeah, and so your faculty will go to accommodation letters, and then they can see, ones that were requested, any that were signed already. And then just like students, they would come down here and they would sign. Okay. And so I'm coming back down to accessibility and accommodations, and I'm going into Carly's file. And if I go back into her letters tab, now I can see those two signatures, right? So I can see that Carly signed at, 140, and I can see that Brew Breaker signed also at 139 and 140. So yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions about that workflow?
No, can you go back?
Yeah, to the letters tab?
Yes.
Yes.
What will be the parent letter?
Okay. So parent letter means, so like for Carly's, for what we just did, the parent letter is the official letter of accommodation for Carly. So this is her official accommodation letter, and then these are sort of like the offspring. So the letters that go to the faculty are the offspring, and so you can see that the parent letter is this letter of accommodation that we sent Carly. So really it's just saying like, what's the main letter that these came from?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. You can also see when those are open. So I'm not a real user, so it didn't actually record that I opened anything, but if a faculty or a student opens, you can see that. So that's nice.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So things, I'll put this in my follow-up, but things that I would need are those email templates, right? For, we need to meet, or please send documentation. Thank you for submitting, and then requesting signatures. So I'll send some templates for all of those things, and I'll send a list of the emails we're looking for. But at the beginning is where I ask for like tons of things, and then that will slow down. But okay. And then let me start going back through your list of information. Okay. So there is also a form in Accommodate. Actually, sorry, let me open that up. It's called the Supplemental Request. So when students who are already registered, so like Carly, for example, you approve her for accommodations today, and then in 6 months she comes back and says, I actually need more accommodations, right? Now I need something else. In Accommodate, you can, if you want, you can have students who come back to you and say, hey, I need something new. You can direct them to log into Accommodate, and then they can use what we call the supplemental request. And it's basically just another form that they can fill out to request additional accommodations.
Okay.
And so you can put on this form, if you want to use it, you can put whatever questions you want on here. A lot of schools, if they do use this form, will ask a question like, is this accommodation request related to a disability we already have on file, or for a new disability or something like that. But again, so then the student would fill this out. And again, you can give them your list of accommodations and your list of disabilities, or they can just free write, you have all the same options. But so they can submit a supplemental request, and then that would land in Accommodate, kind of like the public request, only it's not public. And then you can process it in the system.
Okay.
Is that something you're interested in using?
I believe yes, because usually students came back months after getting their first accommodations, and they usually came back with new needs.
Mm-hmm.
So yes.
Okay. And then so we'll go through this process probably next week, but something that you can also do, so like if Carly reaches out to you and wants new accommodations, you can direct her to log in and submit a request. You can also, from her case file, go into the supplemental tab and add additional accommodations. So if she just comes in and you meet with her, instead of making her fill that out, you could just come in here, and again, this doesn't have to be required. You could just put in the accommodations and make use of it that way too. So options both ways, right? It's there, which is great. So students might start to get in the habit of using that. And while you're transitioning your students over, this is a good option too. So we'll go through that process later, but okay. So I would ask that you also send me, and it's okay if we don't have all these by next week, obviously, but I would just want whatever questions you'd want to ask on that supplemental form. So keep in mind that you already have all their basic info, right? It's going to attach to their case file. So you just want to focus on questions about what's new or what's changed or what they're requesting. Okay. All right. Okay. And then the last thing I'll show you is, so for students who, so you had indicated that students, what's the language that we used? So every semester, sorry, you have per every academic term, students are renewing their accommodations, right? They reach out to you and renew.
Yes, every semester.
Right. Okay, great. So Accommodate works the same way, and it's a pretty quick and simple process. So let me pick another student. Let me use Clark. So I'm going to log in as Clark. So every semester, you will want your students to do this process. And again, it's pretty quick and easy. We'll review it and such. But so you'll have the student log in to Accommodate. And then the term we have now, again, all of this language can be changed. So we can change it to Spanish, but also, to a different terminology if you want. But so they will click on semester request. They'll add a new one. They'll see what accommodations they've been approved for. They'll pick the semester that's upcoming. Of course, I picked a test student who probably already has summer accommodations, but sorry, give me 1 second. Clark. Why doesn't he have? Oh, whoops. That's why. Sorry, Armando. Okay, sorry, I picked a bad test student. This is the challenge with test data. It's like, what have I done with all of these students? Okay. So, student will log in, they'll go to accommodation and semester request, they'll click add new, they'll see what they've been approved for, they'll click the semester, and then they have two options. So they can submit for all, where that's just the student saying, I want all my accommodations for all my classes, or they can review the renewal and they can look at the accommodation and then decide which classes they want to use it in. And so they can uncheck a course if they don't want. If they don't want to use the accommodation at all, they can remove it. It doesn't remove it from their case file, just from this particular semester request. So if I change my mind and in a month I want to use that accommodation, they can submit a new semester request for that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And they go ahead and submit. And that's all they need to do, right? Then it's up to you to create the letters, which can also be pretty quick and easy. But that's really all you need the students to do every semester to request a new copy of their accommodation letter. On your end, I'll just show you this briefly. So when a student submits a semester request, there's a queue for that, right? So I can see that Armando just submitted a semester request. I'm going to click view all. And then from here, I've got sort of two options. So I can process each request individually. So to do that, I would open it up. I'll hit review semester request. It will show me what the student is requesting. So he wants this accommodation in one of his classes, this one in both, and this one in both. All looks good to me. I'm going to hit save and create letter. It's going to pull you right into your accommodation letter template once I have that. It's already going to have the accommodations attached. You're just going to online preview, make sure everything looks good. And you're going to request your signatures and you're going to email the letter now. So pretty quick. And then you do have to go back to the core, and just like we did before, you have to mark it as delivered so that the case file moves back into complete. The other option is, just ignore me, you never should do this. This is a bad example. So your other option is if you have if you have like I don't know, at the beginning of your year, maybe you have like 50 a week that come in, depends on how many students. But if you have a lot and you don't want to individually process them, you're going to, you're going to view all. And then instead of opening up this semester request, you just select all of them. So you use this little gray box. It's going to select everything in your list. You go to batch options, approve and send letter. It's going to remind you that you can't individually edit letters if you do this. So if you do this, you can't go in and change the language in one of the letters. They're all going to be the same. You click OK. It's going to show you a preview. You still have the ability to request signatures, so you can request faculty and student. You can still online preview. And if you had like 10 in here, it would show you all 10 previews. So you can see them all. And then you can hit send. And when you do it this way, it automatically moves their case files into complete. So you don't have to do that either.
Oh, perfect.
So kind of two options, right? You can individually process them. And a lot of schools start by doing that just until they feel comfortable. And then, if you want, you can also batch approve them. So that's like the semester renewal process. Do you have any questions about that?
No, I really like how easy it will be for us and for the students to use this platform. It's great.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. So basically, I just need a lot of email templates from you. And
Yeah.
so what I'll do is I'll send a follow-up with the list of emails that I need. I'll attach some templates for you to look at and decide if you want to use any of them or edit them, right? Whatever you want to do. And then next week, I'd love to just review this again. So maybe once we have templates in the system, it'll be a little bit more like, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Oh,
And then after that, we'll move on to the next module, which will be appointments.
right.
So does that sound like does that plan work for you?
Yes, that will be perfect. Would you send me a list of options for our next meeting?
Yeah, here, actually, let me